They stole it. The sentence echoed through the packed auditorium before the applause could fade. Professor Malcolm Hayes stood beneath the giant projection screen, one hand resting proudly on the glass case that held a weathered bronze seal unearthed from the Long River Basin. Cameras flashed as reporters crowded closer. "Our university," he declared, smiling with practiced humility, "has achieved one of the greatest archaeological breakthroughs of the decade. My discovery, not ours. Mine." Every scratch on that seal had passed beneath my fingertips. Every layer of soil had stained my hands. I had slept beside the excavation trench through freezing nights because a single unexpected rainfall could have destroyed the site forever. Now I stood behind the audience barricade wearing a visitor's badge. No invitation. No acknowledgement. No name. Someone brushed against my shoulder. "Daniel." I turned. Lena Foster, the university's legal counsel, looked pale. "You shouldn't be here." "I know. They're expecting trouble." I smiled. "So are you." Her lips tightened. "They've prepared statements." "I'm sure they have. They think you're going to interrupt." "I won't." She frowned harder. "Why not?" I looked toward the stage again. Professor Hayes accepted another round of applause while Dean Eleanor Brooks shook hands with government officials. 3 years. 3 years of excavations. 3 years of paperwork. 3 years of nights spent cataloging every artifact, reduced to a 30-minute ceremony where my existence had been erased. "I don't need to interrupt," I said quietly. Lena searched my face. "You don't even look angry." I was. When? The day they decided to steal it. Silence stretched between us. She lowered her voice. "Daniel, if you don't challenge them today, this becomes history." "No." I watched another camera flash. "It becomes evidence." The exhibit hall glittered with polished marble floors and expensive lighting. Everything looked perfect. Too perfect. Hayes stepped toward the display. "Our authentication process confirms." The microphone crackled, then died. Technicians hurried across the stage. Hayes laughed awkwardly. "Small technical difficulties." The audience chuckled politely. I checked my watch. 10:28. Right on schedule. Lena noticed. "You keep looking at the time." "I'm waiting." "For what?" I didn't answer. Across the room, Dean Brooks whispered urgently to an assistant. Her confidence had disappeared. Interesting. Someone important must have arrived. The main entrance opened. Not dramatically. Quietly. A woman in a Navy government suit entered with 4 officials carrying leather document cases. Nobody applauded. Nobody even noticed them. Except me. Lena followed my gaze. "Who are they?" "The people who own the truth." 6 months earlier, Professor Hayes had entered my office carrying expensive coffee. "Daniel, you never bring me coffee." He laughed. "Maybe I should more often." Something was wrong. He never visited junior researchers without a reason. He sat opposite me. "The board is reviewing funding." "I know. They're concerned about publicity." I continued sorting excavation photographs. "So, they believe discoveries of this scale should represent institutional achievement." I looked up. "What does that mean?" "It means..." He folded his hands. "Individual recognition can create unnecessary complications." The room became very quiet. "You want my name removed." "I want the university protected." "My name is on every field report." "We can revise documentation." "My research licenses are personal." "We'll handle the legal side." I stared at him. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Finally, I asked, "Have you already decided?" He didn't answer. He didn't need to. That night, I unlocked the fireproof cabinet inside my office. Most people thought archaeology was about digging. It wasn't. It was paperwork. Every artifact existed only because documentation proved where, when, and by whom it had been recovered. Without legal provenance, history became theft. Inside the cabinet rested the original excavation licenses, government permits, satellite records, witness statements, GPS logs, chain of custody forms. Everything. I photographed every page, scanned every signature, created encrypted copies. Then I placed the originals somewhere no one at the university could legally access again. Not because I planned revenge, because I understood something Hayes never did. Greedy people always believe they control the ending. 2 weeks later, my office was searched. Officially, an inventory audit. Unofficially, they were hunting documents. Cabinets opened, drawers emptied, hard drives copied. I stood beside the window drinking tea while administrators searched through years of my work. One young assistant looked embarrassed. I'm sorry. It's your job. They said documents are missing. They are. His head snapped toward me. You know where they are? Yes. He hesitated. Will you tell them? No. By evening, Professor Hayes stormed into my office. Where are the originals? I archived them. Where? In accordance with government preservation law. His face hardened. You're making this difficult. No. I met his eyes. You are. He leaned across my desk. The university paid for this excavation. The university funded equipment. It funded you. It employed me. Same thing. I almost laughed. No, Professor. I stood. The law disagrees. His jaw tightened. I hope you understand what refusing cooperation means. I do. He left without another word. The next morning, my access card stopped working. The security gate flashed red. Access denied. The guard shifted uncomfortably. There must be a mistake. There isn't, I replied. He avoided my eyes. I've been instructed to escort you to human resources. Employees walking through the lobby slowed just enough to watch. Whispers followed behind me like falling leaves. So it was true. I heard he violated protocol. They're saying he hid research data. That's serious. Nobody asked me what had happened. People rarely asked questions when a comfortable answer had already been provided. The HR office smelled of fresh coffee and polished wood. Dean Eleanor Brooks sat at the conference table with 2 attorneys and Professor Hayes. An envelope rested in front of my chair. Brooks folded her hands. Daniel. I remained standing. Please sit. I'd rather not. She forced a patient smile. As you know, concerns have arisen regarding your compliance with university property policies. My compliance? Hayes cleared his throat dramatically. Certain excavation materials have not been properly transferred. You mean documents? If you prefer. They're government records. They were created during university employment. They belong to the excavation registry. One attorney slid a contract across the table. We've prepared an agreement. I glanced down. Transfer of intellectual property. Permanent assignment. Retroactive authorship amendment. My name would disappear from every official record. In return, a confidentiality payment. I looked at the amount. It would have changed my life a year ago. Now it looked surprisingly small. Dean Brooks spoke softly. This protects everyone's reputation. I looked up. Especially yours. Her smile disappeared. Hayes leaned forward. Daniel, don't destroy your career over pride. My career. Think carefully. I already have. I picked up the pen. The room relaxed. Hayes even smiled. I signed. Not the transfer. The resignation letter underneath it. Silence. Brooks blinked. What? I slid the signed resignation across the table. I resign, effective immediately. Hayes laughed once. You think another university will hire you after this? I don't know. And you'll leave everything you've built? I stood. No. I'll leave what you've built. By afternoon, my office was empty. Books packed. Field journals boxed. Personal photographs wrapped in newspaper. One item remained on the shelf. A cracked clay fragment from my first excavation as a graduate student. Worthless financially. Priceless to me. I reached toward it. Then stopped. No. I left it behind. Not everything deserved to be carried into a new life. Outside, rain had begun to fall. Lena found me loading boxes into my old pickup truck. You actually resigned. Yes. They thought you'd fight. I did. The moment I stopped needing them. She stared at me. You've changed. No. I closed the truck bed. They're just seeing me clearly for the first time. Her phone vibrated. She answered. Color drained from her face. You're kidding. She slowly lowered the phone. What happened? She looked at me as though seeing a stranger. The Royal Historical Institute. I remained silent. They've offered you the director of field authentication position. I know. You knew? I accepted yesterday. Her mouth opened. You accepted before today? Yes. But everyone thinks your career is over. They're welcome to think that. Rain tapped against the truck roof. Lena whispered. You planned all of this. No. I looked back at the university towers disappearing behind gray clouds. I prepared for what I knew they would choose. 3 months later, the university announced the grand unveiling of the discovery. My discovery. Every news outlet celebrated their achievement. Every interview praised Professor Hayes. Every article repeated the same lie. I accepted every invitation to comment, then politely declined. People mistook silence for surrender. They always did. Back in the exhibit hall, Applause rose again as Hayes reached toward the bronze seal. The government delegation stopped at the front row. One official opened a leather folder. Another approached the stage. Dean Brooks noticed them first. Her smile froze. The official held up an embossed document. Professor Hayes. The microphone had begun working again. His next words echoed through the entire hall. Under authority of the National Cultural Heritage Office, this exhibition is suspended pending investigation into fraudulent ownership declarations. The room fell silent. Every camera turned. Every smile vanished. I didn't move. I simply watched. Because sometimes the loudest revenge was saying nothing at all. No one applauded. The silence inside the exhibition hall was heavier than any accusation. Professor Hayes forced a laugh that cracked halfway through. There must be some misunderstanding. The lead investigator, Director Samuel Reed of the National Cultural Heritage Office, didn't smile. There isn't. He walked onto the stage with measured steps, holding a sealed leather portfolio. Dean Eleanor Brooks hurried toward him. Director Reed, perhaps we could discuss this privately. No. His voice remained calm. This matter concerns public ownership of a nationally significant archaeological discovery. It will be addressed publicly. Every reporter in the room raised a camera. Flash. 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 Hayes swallowed. What exactly is the accusation? Director Reed opened the portfolio. We received the original excavation registration documents. The words hit the room like a hammer. Original. Not copies. Not reconstructions. Originals. Hayes instinctively looked toward the audience. Toward me. Our eyes met. For the first time in months, there was no arrogance in his expression. Only confusion. He couldn't understand how the documents had reached the government. Good. Confused people made careless mistakes. The registration, Reed continued, clearly identifies one individual as the lead discoverer and legal custodian. Another flash. Reporters leaned forward. Who? Can you release the name? Reed closed the folder. That information will become public after formal verification. Hayes quickly interrupted. Our university possesses authenticated copies. I'm aware. And those copies were altered. The sentence landed with terrifying precision. Someone in the audience gasped. Dean Brooks took a step backward. Director Reed. Every modification has already been confirmed by forensic document analysis. The color drained from her face. Hayes looked as though he couldn't breathe. I remained where I was, hands inside my coat pockets. Watching. Nothing more. Outside the hall, reporters exploded into chaos. Professor Hayes. Dean Brooks. Did the university falsify records? Who discovered the artifact? Security struggled to hold back the crowd. Lena found me standing beneath an old maple tree across the street. You aren't going to speak? No. They're asking for you. I know. They'll find you eventually. They're supposed to. She folded her arms. I still don't understand. What? How you're so calm. I watched rainwater drip from the branches. When someone steals your house, you don't need to chase them. She frowned. You wait. You wait until the real owner arrives. 3 days later, the university campus became a battlefield. Faculty meetings stretched into midnight. Lawyers entered and exited administrative buildings without pause. Every news channel carried the same headline. Heritage fraud investigation expands. Former colleagues suddenly remembered my phone number. 32 missed calls. 11 emails. 6 text messages. I answered none of them. Instead, I unpacked books inside my new office at the Royal Historical Institute. The room overlooked the harbor. Quiet. Bright. No marble floors. No oversized portraits. No political games disguised as academic tradition. A knock came at the open door. Director Amelia Chun entered carrying 2 cups of tea. She wasn't much older than me, yet she already commanded the institute with quiet confidence. No coffee. I smiled. I've had enough coffee to last a lifetime. She laughed and placed the tea on my desk. I've been watching the news. I assumed you had. You've become unexpectedly famous. I'd rather not be. She leaned against the bookshelf. They'll keep coming after you. I know. They'll apologize. I know. They'll promise promotions. I know. She tilted her head. And I already have everything I wanted. Her eyebrows lifted. Justice? No. I looked out the window. Peace. For several seconds, she simply watched me. Then she nodded once. I chose the right person. That afternoon, I walked through the Institute's artifact vault. Hundreds of shelves. Thousands of pieces. Each one carried a complete chain of custody. No missing signatures. No political revisions. No convenient lies. A young researcher hurried toward me. Director Cross? Yes. A courier delivered something. He handed me a sealed envelope. University of Westbridge. No return address. Inside was a single handwritten note. Please meet me tonight. Alone. No signature. Only an address. I folded the paper. Amelia noticed. Problem. I don't know yet. Will you go? Yes. She didn't ask why. She simply said, take someone you trust. The restaurant was nearly empty. Rain blurred the city lights beyond the windows. When I entered, I recognized the woman immediately. Dean Eleanor Brooks. She looked 10 years older than she had a week earlier. Dark circles beneath her eyes. Shoulders slightly bent. She stood as I approached. Thank you for coming. I almost didn't. I know. She gestured toward the empty chair. I'd like 5 minutes. I sat. Nothing more. The waiter brought tea. Neither of us touched it. Finally she spoke. We made mistakes. I said nothing. She exhaled slowly. No. We made choices. Better. At least she had learned the correct word. The investigation. She paused. Is becoming serious. I've heard. They're looking at financial records now. I expected they would. She stared. You expected this? I expected consequences. Her fingers tightened around the teacup. We can still resolve this. Can we? If you withdraw your claims. I interrupted for the first time. I never filed one. She blinked. What? I never accused the university. But the documents were submitted to the Heritage Office. By you? No. Her breathing stopped. If not you. I held her gaze. You should ask yourself who else had a legal obligation to report forged historical records. The realization struck her slowly. Government archivists. Mandatory reporting laws. Once the originals entered the National Archive, the investigation had become automatic. No one could stop it. Her hands began to tremble. You knew? Her voice was barely audible. You knew this would happen. I knew the law. You set a trap. No. I shook my head. You stepped into one. Tears gathered in her eyes. You could have warned us. I did. She looked up, confused. When I told Professor Hayes the documents belonged to the government. Silence. Memory returned to her face. She remembered that meeting. She remembered dismissing my words. Not because she believed I was wrong. Because she believed I was powerless. Power often made intelligent people deaf. She leaned back in her chair. What do you want? The question surprised me. I don't want anything. There has to be something. There isn't. Money. No. Recognition. I've already been recognized. She stared. Then why are you here? I looked at the untouched tea between us. Because you asked. Nothing more. Nothing less. For several seconds neither of us spoke. Then she whispered. I thought you'd hate us. I did. The honesty made her flinch. But hatred is expensive. I stood. I couldn't afford to carry it. She reached out instinctively. Daniel. I stopped. Without turning around. I'm truly sorry. For the first time. She sounded sincere. I closed my eyes briefly. I believe you. She seemed almost relieved. Then I added quietly. It doesn't change anything. The investigation spread beyond the archaeology department. Email records disappeared. Accounting files were seized. Anonymous faculty members began speaking to journalists. The story no longer belonged to one discovery. It had become a story about corruption. Professor Hayes stopped appearing in public. Rumors multiplied daily. Some claimed he had resigned. Others claimed he was negotiating immunity. No one knew the truth. At the Institute, my days settled into a peaceful rhythm. Field reports. Artifact verification. Training younger researchers. One afternoon, I noticed a graduate assistant lingering outside my office. He looked nervous. Come in. He stepped inside. My name's Eric. I know. He swallowed. I worked at Westbridge. I remember. I helped inventory your office. I remember that too. His ears reddened. I'm sorry. For what? I knew they were searching for something. You were following orders. I still should have said something. I studied him. He couldn't have been older than 24. Smart. Earnest. Burdened by guilt that wasn't truly his. Eric. Yes. Do you know why archaeological sites survive for thousands of years? He blinked. No. Because every generation protects them a little. He looked confused. I don't understand. You don't erase history by making one mistake. I extended my hand. You protect the next one. His shoulders relaxed for the first time. Would you? He hesitated. Consider taking me on here? I smiled. Submit your application. His eyes widened. Really? I hire honest people. He laughed through visible relief. I won't disappoint you. I know. That evening, Amelia entered my office carrying a thin folder. We've received a confidential notice. She placed it on my desk. I opened it. National Cultural Heritage Office. Preliminary findings. Forgery confirmed. Unauthorized alterations confirmed. Misappropriation of intellectual authorship confirmed. I read every page in silence. At the bottom sat one final paragraph. Criminal interviews will begin Monday morning. Amelia watched my expression. How do you feel? I closed the folder gently. I feel. I searched for the right word. Finished. She smiled faintly. No. I looked at her. This chapter. Outside the office window, evening settled over the harbor. Far across the city skyline, the lights of Westbridge University flickered against the darkening sky. For years, I had believed those buildings contained my future. Now they were simply another place I used to know. My phone vibrated. An unknown number. I answered. A man's exhausted voice came through the speaker. Daniel. Professor Hayes. I need to see you. I said nothing. Then he spoke 5 words that made the room fall completely silent. I didn't act alone. The line went silent. Not because the call had ended. Because neither of us spoke. I could hear Professor Malcolm Hayes breathing on the other end. It was uneven, strained, nothing like the confident cadence that had filled lecture halls for years. Finally, I asked one question. Why are you telling me now? A bitter laugh escaped him. Because everyone else is already preparing to blame me. I looked through my office window at the harbor. Cargo ships drifted slowly across the gray water, indifferent to the storms that ruined people on land. Weren't they always going to? I thought. His voice faltered. I thought loyalty meant something. It does. And it only exists until fear becomes stronger. He was quiet. You've learned that now. Another long silence. I want to meet. No. Daniel. I've spent months learning how peaceful life is when I stop cleaning up other people's mistakes. I'm not asking you to save me. No. I just want you to hear the truth. The investigators will. They won't hear everything. I closed my eyes for a moment. What makes you think I need to? The call ended. Not with an argument. Not with anger. Simply silence. The next morning, news trucks crowded the entrance to Westbridge University. I watched the live broadcast from the Institute cafeteria. Federal investigators walked through the front gate carrying sealed evidence cases. Employees entering campus had to show identification before crossing the security perimeter. Around me, younger researchers whispered, I can't believe this is happening. They're searching the administration building. I heard even the president's office is sealed. Someone noticed me watching. The room fell noticeably quieter. Nobody asked what I was thinking. Perhaps they assumed I was satisfied. They were wrong. There was no satisfaction in watching a place you once loved collapse. Only sadness. And distance. Amelia sat across from me with a bowl of soup. You can stop watching. I know. You aren't responsible for whatever happens now. I know. Then why? I smiled faintly. Because I spent 13 years inside those buildings. She nodded. You mourning them? No. I looked back at the television. I'm mourning what they could have been. That afternoon, Director Samuel Reed arrived unexpectedly. Unlike the media, he never wasted words. Daniel. Director. We need 20 minutes. My office. He nodded. Once the door closed, he placed a thick binder on my desk. We've reconstructed the document trail. I didn't open it. You already know most of it. I can guess. Guessing isn't evidence. He pushed the binder closer. Read. Inside were hundreds of pages. Emails. Meeting minutes. Internal memos. Financial authorizations. One email immediately caught my attention. From Eleanor Brooks. To Malcolm Hayes. Proceed only after legal confirms the registry cannot challenge authorship. Date. Signature. Timestamp. I turned another page. Another email. From Office of University President. Institutional ownership is strategically preferable to individual recognition. Another. Another. The pattern became impossible to ignore. This had never been one professor's crime. It had been policy. Years of it. Reed watched me quietly. You understand now. I do. We've identified 7 people involved. Only 7. He almost smiled. You're optimistic. I closed the binder. So Professor Hayes wasn't lying. No. He didn't act alone. No. Reed folded his hands. There's something else. I waited. The original documents weren't the first thing that triggered our investigation. That surprised me. What was? He slid a single photograph across the desk. I frowned. It showed an artifact storage room. Empty shelves. Broken inventory seals. What's this? Audit photographs. I don't understand. The university attempted to replace the original excavation collection with replicas. I looked up sharply. What? They assumed the originals would eventually be requested. A cold weight settled in my chest. They were going to fabricate history. They tried. For the first time since leaving Westbridge, I felt genuine anger. Not because of what they'd done to me. Because of what they had tried to do to history itself. Artifacts weren't trophies. They were evidence. Every forged object distorted the lives of people who had existed centuries before us. Reed seemed to read my thoughts. That's why I came personally. You think I'll interfere. I think you'll want to. He wasn't wrong. For several seconds I stared at the photograph. Then I slowly pushed it back toward him. No. His eyebrows lifted. No. I resigned. This isn't about employment. It isn't. I stood and walked toward the window. But if I step back into that investigation, I'll spend another year living inside their corruption. I turned. I already left. Reed studied me for a long moment. Then he nodded once. I hoped you'd say that. 3 days later, Professor Hayes was arrested. The footage spread across every major news channel. No handcuffs. No dramatic struggle. Just an exhausted man walking beside investigators while avoiding every camera. Comment sections celebrated. Former students cursed him. Academic rivals mocked him. I closed the video after 12 seconds. Enough. That evening someone knocked on my apartment door. Not my office. My home. I opened it cautiously. Lena Foster stood there holding a cardboard archive box. She looked exhausted. You shouldn't be here. I know. You'll be seen. I don't care anymore. I stepped aside. She entered quietly. The apartment smelled of old books and jasmine tea. She placed the archive box on my dining table. I found this during the record seizure. I opened it. Inside were notebooks. My notebooks. The ones missing from my office after the inventory audit. Field journals. Sketches. Site maps. I picked one up carefully. Mud stains still marked the edges. My handwriting filled every page. They kept these. She nodded. In Professor Hayes's private cabinet. Why? He couldn't read half your field shorthand. Despite everything. I almost laughed. Some habits never changed. She looked around the apartment. It's peaceful here. It is. You don't miss the university? I miss archaeology. She lowered her eyes. I resigned yesterday. I looked up. You did. They wanted me to defend decisions I knew were illegal. So you walked away. I learned from someone. Our eyes met briefly. Neither of us smiled. Some lessons cost too much for celebration. She hesitated before speaking again. There's something else. What? The Board of Trustees. I waited. They voted to terminate President Arthur Whitmore. That name lingered in the air. Most people had never seen the university president. He operated from private meetings and donor dinners. Invisible. Untouchable. Or so everyone believed. So it reached him. Lena nodded. It always does. She looked directly at me. You know what frightened them most? What? It wasn't the investigation. It was your silence. I frowned. They couldn't understand why you never attacked them. I poured 2 cups of tea. They expected lawsuits. They prepared for them. They expected interviews. They prepared statements. They expected public outrage. They hired crisis consultants. She gave a tired laugh. But you did nothing. I handed her a cup. No. I sat opposite her. I stopped protecting them. She stared into the steam rising from the tea. I finally understand the difference. The following Monday, Amelia entered my office carrying a sealed envelope. No sender. Inside was a handwritten letter. Not from Hayes. Not from Brooks. The signature at the bottom made me pause. Arthur Whitmore, former university president. The first sentence was enough to make my pulse slow. You deserve the truth about why they needed your name erased. I turned the page. There were 6 more. Every line hinted at something far older than simple academic theft. A buried funding scandal. A donor with political influence. Excavation permits that had never been obtained legally. The stolen credit had only been the beginning. I folded the letter carefully. Outside my office, the harbor wind rattled the windows. For months, I had believed the worst was already behind me. I was wrong. The discovery they stole had uncovered something much larger than ancient history. It had uncovered the living corruption built around it. The letter smelled faintly of old leather and cigar smoke. Arthur Whitmore had always been meticulous. Even his handwriting reflected it. Precise, controlled, impossible to rush. I read the first page again. Daniel, if this letter has reached you, then the university has already sacrificed Malcolm Hayes. No apology. No greeting. Only a statement. I continued. You probably believe your discovery was stolen because of ambition. It wasn't. I frowned. The next sentence made me stop breathing for a moment. The excavation should never have happened. Amelia entered without knocking. She immediately noticed my expression. What happened? I handed her the letter. She read silently. Halfway through, she looked up. This can't be true. I don't know. It says the excavation permit itself was fraudulent. I know. If that's true. She closed the folder slowly. Every decision afterward makes sense. I leaned back. No. She looked at me. It explains them, not justifies them. She nodded. You're right. According to Whitmore, 15 years earlier, a private investment consortium had quietly funded archaeological surveys across several provinces. Officially, they supported cultural preservation. Unofficially, they wanted land. Ancient heritage designations could dramatically affect future development projects. If ruins were officially recognized, construction stopped, land values shifted, entire commercial projects collapsed. Someone had realized archaeology could become a financial weapon. Our excavation site sat directly above land worth billions. The bronze seal wasn't just history. It was legal proof that the valley qualified as a protected heritage zone. If my name remained attached to the discovery, every document would be scrutinized, every permit verified, every approval questioned. That scrutiny would expose permits issued through political pressure. It would expose donors, officials, developers, people whose names had never appeared in newspapers. Suddenly, stealing my credit seemed almost insignificant. I wasn't the target. I was the loose thread. They had tried to cut it before the entire fabric unraveled. Amelia closed the last page. Do you believe him? I believe part of it. Which part? That someone much bigger benefited. And the rest? We'll find out. 2 days later, Director Samuel Reed requested another meeting. This time, it wasn't in his office. It was inside the National Archives. A climate-controlled vault stretched beneath the building. Shelves reached almost to the ceiling. Centuries of history rested inside quiet gray boxes. Reed stopped before a locked cabinet. You've never been here. No. He unlocked the door. Inside rested the original excavation registry. Not copies. The originals. He carefully removed one folder. Look. I opened it. Every signature remained untouched. Every approval intact. Every page exactly as I remembered. Except one page. The final authorization. It carried an additional stamp. Confidential review. I looked toward Reed. I've never seen this. You weren't supposed to. He slid another document across the table. The review occurred 3 days before your excavation began. I read the names. One belonged to Arthur Whitmore. Another to Dean Brooks. The third made my hands freeze. Minister of Regional Development. I looked up slowly. The government? A small part of it. They knew. They approved it. Why? Reed's expression darkened. They believed nothing valuable would be found. And when we found it, they couldn't control the consequences. The investigation suddenly felt much larger than a university scandal. It had become political. Dangerously political. Reed watched me carefully. I need to ask you something. What? If Parliament opens a public inquiry. He paused. Will you testify? The question lingered between us. Months earlier I would have answered immediately. Now, I wasn't sure. I don't want revenge. I know. I don't want publicity. I know. I just want to live honestly. Reed nodded. So do I. He folded his hands. But sometimes honesty requires witnesses. I looked down at the ancient seal resting inside its preservation case. For centuries it had survived floods, wars, dynasties, empires. It had waited patiently for someone to tell its story correctly. Perhaps people deserve the same chance. I'll testify. Parliament Hall was quieter than I expected. No shouting. No dramatic confrontations. Only rows of officials, legal representatives, journalists, and witnesses. Truth rarely arrived with fireworks. More often, it arrived inside folders. My name was called. I walked toward the witness table. Every camera followed. Months ago, that attention would have terrified me. Now it felt strangely distant. The committee chairman adjusted his glasses. Mr. Daniel Cross. Yes. You understand you're under oath. I do. He nodded. Please describe the discovery. I didn't begin with accusations. I didn't mention betrayal. I spoke about the excavation, the workers, the students, the careful removal of every stone, the responsibility of preserving history. For nearly an hour, I answered questions. Calmly. Precisely. Every answer supported by documents already entered into evidence. No speeches. No anger. Facts. Only facts. Then came the final question. Did Professor Malcolm Hayes steal your discovery? The room became completely still. Every reporter leaned forward. Everyone expected a dramatic answer. I looked toward the public gallery. Hayes sat there beside his attorney. Older. Thinner. Broken. Our eyes met. Then I answered. No. The room erupted with whispers. The chairman raised his hand for silence. You deny your previous position? I never accused him of stealing my discovery. Then what happened? I spoke slowly. My discovery was stolen by fear. Silence. Fear of losing money. Fear of losing influence. Fear of accountability. I looked around the chamber. Professor Hayes participated. So did others. But no single person created this. The chairman studied me carefully. And your evidence? I lifted the original registry. It speaks for itself. Over the following weeks, the consequences unfolded exactly as they should. Arthur Whitmore was formally charged with abuse of public office. Several developers lost government contracts. Regional officials resigned. The investment consortium dissolved under criminal investigation. Dean Eleanor Brooks accepted a lifetime ban from university administration in exchange for full cooperation. Professor Hayes pleaded guilty, not to save himself, but to stop younger faculty members from being prosecuted for decisions they had never made. History would remember him as a brilliant scholar who allowed ambition to destroy integrity. A tragic ending, but an honest one. 6 months later, the National Museum reopened the exhibition. This time, a small bronze plaque rested beside the ancient seal. It didn't call me a genius. It didn't celebrate heroism. It simply read, Lead Discoverer, Daniel Cross. Field team and community volunteers recognized in full archive. Nothing more. Nothing less. I stood quietly before the display. Visitors walked past without recognizing me. Children pressed their hands against the glass, fascinated by an object older than imagination itself. An elderly man beside me smiled. Beautiful, isn't it? It is. They must have worked very hard to preserve it. I looked at the seal, then at the dozens of names engraved below mine. Yes, they did. For the first time since everything began, the story belonged to history, not to me. And that was exactly where it belonged. Spring arrived quietly. The city shed the last traces of winter without asking anyone's permission. Cherry trees bloomed along the river outside the Royal Historical Institute, and every morning students gathered beneath them with sketchbooks, excavation manuals, and coffee cups balanced precariously on their knees. I had never noticed how peaceful learning could be when it wasn't driven by politics. A knock sounded against my open office door. Director Cross? Eric stepped inside carrying a stack of applications. He looked far more confident than the nervous graduate assistant who had first walked into my office months earlier. The internship committee finished its recommendations. He placed the folders on my desk. We've narrowed it down to 12. I glanced at the names. Most were unfamiliar. One wasn't. Westbridge University. I looked up. They're applying here now? Eric nodded. They've been encouraged to. By whom? The interim dean. I smiled faintly. So they're finally teaching humility. Eric laughed. I think they're teaching survival. The interview room overlooked the institute's excavation gardens. Each applicant entered with polished resumes and rehearsed confidence. Until the final candidate. Nathan Cole, 23, top of his graduating class. Former student assistant under Professor Hayes. He sat stiffly, refusing to meet my eyes. I recognized him immediately. He had been in the audience during the exhibition. He had watched everything. After several routine questions, I closed his file. You're uncomfortable. Yes. Why? He hesitated. I work for Professor Hayes. I know. I thought you would reject me because of that. I leaned back. Do you know why I agreed to interview you? He shook his head. Because your recommendation letter didn't mention your grades. His expression changed. It described one thing. He frowned. Returns damaged artifacts before anyone notices they're missing. I nodded. Integrity. He blinked. I've never had anyone hire based on that. I don't. Silence. I promote based on it. Nathan's shoulders relaxed. I won't waste the opportunity. I know. That afternoon, Amelia found me reorganizing storage shelves inside the conservation lab. She frowned. You realize you're the director. I do. So why are you carrying crates? Because they need moving. She laughed. You really have no talent for acting important. I've tried. And I got tired. She leaned against a workbench. You've changed. I hope so. No. She smiled. You've healed. The word lingered longer than I expected. Had I? Months ago, every news article had reopened old wounds. Every mention of Westbridge had tightened something inside my chest. Now, the memories still existed. They simply no longer controlled me. Perhaps healing wasn't forgetting. Perhaps it was remembering without bleeding. Later that evening, I unlocked a wooden cabinet in my apartment. Inside rested the only box I had never unpacked. Old excavation journals, field photographs, letters from mentors, and beneath them, the cracked clay fragment I had once left behind. I stared at it. Someone had wrapped it carefully in brown paper. A note rested beside it. Found after your office was cleared. Thought it belonged with you. Lena. I turned the fragment over in my hands. Years ago, it had represented the beginning of my career. Then I had abandoned it because it reminded me of everything I'd lost. Now, it reminded me of something else. Everything I'd survived. I placed it on the bookshelf above my desk. Not as a trophy, as a reminder. The phone rang. Unknown number. I answered. Daniel Cross. A familiar voice replied. This is Malcolm Hayes. I remained silent. I've been released. There was no surprise in his tone, only exhaustion. I wanted you to hear it from me. I appreciate that. Another pause. I've accepted a permanent teaching ban. I heard. I'm moving to a small coastal town. I looked out my apartment window toward the harbor. To retire? No. His voice softened. To volunteer at a local museum. I closed my eyes briefly. That sounded like the man he had once been. Before ambition. Before fear. I hope you do some good there. So do I. He hesitated. I don't expect forgiveness. You shouldn't. I know. But. His voice almost broke. Thank you for never trying to destroy me. I answered honestly. You did enough of that yourself. He let out a quiet, painful laugh. You're right. The call ended. Not as enemies. Not as friends. Simply, as two men whose paths no longer needed to cross. The National Heritage Conference returned the following autumn. 1 year earlier, I would have attended as an anonymous researcher. Then I had become the center of a scandal. This year, I came as the keynote speaker. The auditorium wasn't nearly as grand as Westbridge's exhibition hall. It didn't need to be. The audience consisted of archaeologists, historians, museum curators, conservation students, and local volunteers. People who cared more about truth than prestige. As I stepped onto the stage, applause filled the room. Warm, respectful, never excessive. I waited until it faded. My presentation today, I began, isn't about the Long River excavation. Several people exchanged surprised looks. It's about responsibility. A photograph appeared on the screen. Not the famous bronze seal. A rusted shovel. Scratched work gloves. A faded notebook stained with mud. The most valuable tools in archaeology, I said quietly, are rarely expensive. The audience listened in complete silence. Their honesty, patience, and the courage to record what you find instead of what others wish you had found. No one interrupted. No one checked their phones. For 40 minutes we spoke, not about fame, but stewardship. Not about recognition, but legacy. When the lecture ended, the applause felt different. Not louder, deeper. After the conference, a young girl approached me, holding a notebook against her chest. She couldn't have been older than 16. Excuse me. Yes. I'm applying to study archaeology. Congratulations. My parents say there aren't many successful archaeologists. I smiled. They're probably right. She looked worried. So, do you think I should choose something else? I thought for a moment. What do you hope to find? She blinked. I don't know. Good. She looked confused. If you already knew what you were looking for, it wouldn't be discovery. A slow smile spread across her face. Would you sign my notebook? I did. Not because signatures mattered, Because encouragement did. That evening, Amelia joined me on the Institute's rooftop terrace. The city lights reflected across the river below. She handed me 2 cups of tea. To another successful conference. I accepted one. To another quiet year. She laughed. I think that's what you wanted all along. It is. She looked toward the skyline. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you'd fought them publicly from the beginning? I considered the question carefully, then shook my head. No. Why not? Because I finally understand something. What? I watched the river continue its endless journey toward the sea. You don't always win by proving someone else wrong. You win. I paused. By refusing to become like them. Amelia raised her teacup. That's worth celebrating. We stood together in comfortable silence as evening settled over the city. For the first time in many years. Tomorrow held no courtroom. No investigation. No betrayal. Only work that mattered. Only people who earned one another's trust. Only history waiting patiently to be preserved. It was enough. More than enough. 3 years passed without headlines. For most people, silence meant nothing had happened. For me, it meant life had finally become honest. The Royal Historical Institute expanded into 3 regional research centers. Students I had once interviewed now led their own excavation teams. The Long River discovery had become a standard case study, not for the artifact itself, but for the ethics that had preserved its history. One rainy afternoon, Eric knocked gently on my office door. Do you have a minute? Always. He carried a thin blue folder. You should read this. I opened it. At the top was the letterhead of Westbridge University. I paused. The institution had survived the scandal, though barely. A completely new board governed it now. Nearly every senior administrator from the old era had disappeared. The first sentence caught my attention. The University Council respectfully invites Mr. Daniel Cross to attend the reopening of the Department of Archaeology. I looked up. They're reopening? Eric nodded. With an entirely new faculty. I continued reading. There was no attempt to excuse the past. No carefully crafted public relations language. Only one request. They wanted me to unveil a memorial dedicated to ethical scholarship. I closed the folder. I don't know. Eric waited. I thought you'd refuse. So did I. That evening, I walked along the river alone. The invitation remained folded inside my coat pocket. Months earlier, I would have thrown it away. Years earlier, I would have accepted immediately, hoping to prove something. Now, neither response felt right. My phone vibrated. Amelia. I heard. News travels quickly. It does. What would you do? She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she asked, why do you think they invited you? For publicity? Maybe. For forgiveness? Possibly. For redemption? Perhaps. She smiled softly through the phone. And which of those belongs to you? None of them. The realization came almost instantly. Their redemption wasn't my responsibility. Their guilt wasn't my burden. Their future wasn't mine to build. What belongs to me? My choice. Exactly. A week later, I drove through the gates of Westbridge University for the first time since my resignation. The campus looked familiar, yet strangely smaller. Fresh paint covered old walls. New signs replaced familiar names. Students hurried across the courtyard without recognizing me. Time had done what anger never could. It had moved forward. The interim president met me outside the archaeology building. She extended her hand. I'm President Sophia Bennett. I shook it. Daniel Cross. Thank you for coming. I haven't agreed to anything. I know. She nodded respectfully. I wanted to show you something before asking. She led me into the old archaeology wing. My footsteps slowed. The hallway hadn't changed. The windows. The stone floors. Even the faint scent of dust and paper. Everything felt suspended between memory and reality. Then we reached my old office. The door stood open. I looked inside. It was empty. Completely empty. No furniture. No awards. No portraits. Nothing. President Bennett spoke quietly. We've left it untouched. Why? So the department never forgets what happened here. I stepped inside. Sunlight filtered through the same window where I had once watched administrators search my office. For a moment, I could almost see the younger version of myself. Working late. Believing hard work alone protected truth. He had been wrong. But he hadn't been foolish. He had simply been honest. I smiled faintly. You deserved better. The words weren't spoken to anyone in the room. They were spoken to the man I used to be. President Bennett broke the silence. We're establishing an ethics archive. I turned. It will contain the complete investigation, the original documents, the testimony, the mistakes. She looked directly at me. We don't want future students to inherit our pride. I studied her expression. There was no performance, no hidden agenda, only responsibility. For the first time, Westbridge felt like a university again. The reopening ceremony took place beneath a clear autumn sky. There were no television helicopters, no political speeches, no oversized banners celebrating success. Instead, students filled the courtyard carrying excavation notebooks instead of cameras. A simple bronze plaque stood covered by a dark cloth. President Bennett stepped to the podium. "We cannot build an honest future by hiding an uncomfortable past." Her words carried across the silent crowd. Today is not a celebration of one man's achievement. It is a promise that truth will never again be negotiated. She turned toward me. "Mr. Cross." I walked to the front. The cloth slipped away. The plaque read, "The Daniel Cross Ethics Archive, dedicated to every researcher who chooses truth over recognition, integrity over ambition, and history over personal glory." Beneath those words, every member of the original excavation team had been listed, including the volunteers, including the local workers, including the students whose names had once been ignored, exactly as it should have been. Applause rose gently across the courtyard. Not for me, for what the plaque represented. I preferred it that way. After the ceremony, students surrounded the archive building. One young man hesitated before approaching. "Professor Cross?" I smiled. "I'm not your professor. You could be." I laughed quietly. "What can I help you with?" He held out an old field notebook. "I found this in the archive." I recognized the handwriting immediately. Mine. On the first page, a sentence I had written years ago stared back at me. "History doesn't belong to those who discover it. It belongs to those who protect it." I had forgotten writing those words. The student looked at me. "Did you really believe this back then?" I thought carefully. "No." He looked surprised. I was still learning. "And now?" I closed the notebook gently. "Now I know it's true." As the afternoon faded into evening, I walked alone through the excavation gardens one last time. The wind carried the scent of fresh earth. Students laughed in the distance while cataloging practice artifacts. Life continued, as it always had, as it always would. I realized something then. People often believe justice arrived the moment villains fell. They were wrong. That was only the end of suffering. Real justice began afterward, when honest people built something better where corruption once stood. I looked once toward the old archaeology building. There was no anger left, no regret, no desire to reclaim what had been taken, because nothing essential had ever been stolen. Not my work, not my integrity, not my future. They had kept my glory. I had kept myself. And in the end, that was the only victory that truly mattered.